Blessings and welcome to today's Law Enforcement Daily Devotional. Today we're in Luke chapter 5 through 80. And a good read, lots of good information in this, but a story that we should all be very familiar with. We see this in movies around Christmas time. You hear it read if you go to church on Christmas. But just a good, familiar, traditional read, and there was something comforting about reading this morning that I really appreciated. But in chapter 1 verse 5, our first verse of the day, we read about John the Baptist. And I know I knew this before, I've heard this in sermons before, but something about it really struck today, that John the Baptist was a Levite. I mean, he was a true Levite. His father Zacharias came from the division of Abiah, and I went back into those genealogies we talked about, and in First Chronicles, and I found Abiah, although it doesn't say Abiah, the father of. So it could be the same name used here as was used in First Chronicles, but it was the tribe of Levi, and Zechariah was a Levite. His mother Elizabeth was from the line of Aaron. Aaron was the brother of Moses, and we know Moses was a Levite. Aaron was a Levite. And so when you got his dad and his mom both Levites, so there's no denying. It's like Jesus's genealogy. His mother and his father both could trace their ancestry back to David, so there's no doubt that Jesus was from the line of David. It's just really neat the way these line up. There's also another good takeaway that we'll get down to here in just a little bit. But in verse 12, we have to remember Zechariah is in the temple. God hasn't spoken for 400 years. And that's the traditional theology of the book of Malachi. He shuts the doors of the temple, or he says, I wish you'd shut the doors of the temple because I'm done with you. And then there's a 400-year gap between then and when Jesus shows up on scene. And it's a really cool thought. And I try to put it into perspective of where our country was 400 years ago. Oh, our country wasn't here 400 years ago. That's the kind of perspective of realization that the Jews carried on their traditions, the Hebrews carried on their religion for 400 years without hearing from God, but yet they were faithful. Even though they were not always faithful to God, they were faithful to their man-made traditions, and they were faithful to their religious system. And it is still going on 400 years after the last time they heard from God. No prophets, no nothing. Then all of a sudden, Zechariah is in the temple, and boom, he sees an angel. And this is Gabriel. I wonder, was Gabriel like 12, 15 foot tall? Was he huge? I bet he was. Anyway, no matter what kind of form he appeared in, it would have just probably scared you to death. But anyway, in verse 13, Gabriel tells Zechariah to name their son John. And it's really cool that he tells Zechariah here, because he'll tell Elizabeth, but Zechariah is not able to speak from as soon as he gets done with this angel up until 9 months later, when John the Baptist is born, and he confirms the name. With the confirmation of the name, he gets his speech back. And I kind of jumped ahead. We'll get to that. Verse 18, Zechariah questions the angel about all of this information that he's been given, and that's when the angel stops his vocal cords, shuts his mouth, whatever. He can't speak from this point on. So he tries to sign to everybody. It's pretty cool. Then Gabriel gets to bring the good news. Well, he's brought the good news, but he will continue to bring good news to Mary here in just a moment. But in verse 25, Elizabeth credits her pregnancy to being the favor of God. I mean, she recognizes immediately this pregnancy is only because of God's favor on her. which is really neat because in just a few verses down, we see that Mary goes to her, Mary's baby's alive in the womb, and Mary speaks, or Gabriel speaks to Mary. He says, "You who are favored by the Lord." Mary's favored by the Lord. Elizabeth is favored by the Lord. And then Mary, in verse 30, again we see that she has found favor with God. It's mentioned again. So a lot of this favor from the Lord in this period of time, which only goes to reason. Then in verse 41, a baby in the womb is alive. Okay, it's right here in the Bible. A baby in the womb is alive. Okay, it kills every abortion argument. And I'm sorry I use that terminology, but it does. It destroys every abortion argument there is. A baby in the womb is alive. We see it right here. The baby leaps in her womb when Mary walks in. But the baby, we're told that John the Baptist would be filled with the Holy Spirit from birth, which is pretty cool. And then here in verse 41, we see that Elizabeth is also filled with the Holy Spirit. Zechariah in verse 64 is allowed to speak again when he confirms the name is John. And then in verse 67, Zechariah is filled with the Holy Spirit. And I was looking through notes, all kinds of notes this morning that I've made in different places at different times. And according to my notes, which is not official, but this seems to be the very first time in the Bible we're ever told about an entire family that's filled with the Holy Spirit. Now, in today's culture and society, that's not I started to say not a big deal. It is a big deal, but it happens frequently when everybody in the family has given their life to Christ. They're born again. They've all got the Holy Spirit, but this is pre-Holy Spirit when the Holy Spirit didn't just indwell anybody, but the fact that all three of them are mentioned as being filled with the Holy Spirit, I think, is incredibly significant. And if you think about it, they're filled with the Holy Spirit before Jesus' family's filled with the Holy Spirit. And I mean his earthly family. I don't mean his father and heavenly family. But anyway, it's a really cool read today. Tomorrow our read is in Matthew chapter 1 verses 17 through chapter 2 verse 23 and Luke chapter 2. So I hope you can read ahead and come back here tomorrow and let's see if there's a law enforcement takeaway.